Ruba benam skura hera blap blang.
What up, sitcomers? Welcome back to Bros Before Shows, where every week we relive the morals and laughs of your favorite sitcoms. We are on season 1, episode 8 of our first sitcom, Frasier. This one is all about selflessness. Be sure to go back and watch if you haven't watched it in a while. And remember to follow and comment and let us know what sitcom you want to hear for season 2. I've got T and Taylor with me today. Taylor represents the razzle dazzle in our team. How you guys doing?
I'm doing good today, man. It's an easy Sunday morning. Can't complain. I got the dog with me. We live in life.
Nice. Nice. Taylor, how's your first watch through going?
I'm enjoying it. I'm learning more and more about the characters. I'm really enjoying the show. Yeah.
How are
I
you,
had a
Zach?
couple. I'm doing all right. I had a couple of interesting production things that came up. So, people may know that there is a new Frasier that came out, and some people would say reboot. I don't think they wanted it called that, but in 2023, they kind of did a third act for the character Frasier, and he's now in modern times. You know, it's 20 years after the show, and he's with his son Frederick and all these things. But the new season of it, season 2 of that, is coming out this next week. And so that's pretty exciting. We get the next season of the new Frasier. And then also the magazine did a list of its best episodes. Now, I'm not going to place a judgment on Rolling Stone's list because I have some questions about some of the things they've done. But they did put one of the Frasier episodes as number 27 on their list of best TV episodes of all time. So a couple interesting things that happened in the world of Frasier this week.
Speaking of rankings for the episode, Taylor and I looked at different rankings on IMDb. I happened to see one that was a ranking of all of the shows and all of the seasons. This episode is actually ranked number 14th of all the episodes on IMDb. Funny enough, it's the lowest of all of the ones that we've seen so far. So a lot of season 1 took up those top spots. And out
I
of
like
the
this
8
one.
episodes, I thought this was the best, personally. Out of the 8 episodes we've seen, this was the lowest one.
The community on IMDb rates this as an 8 out of 10.
I do have a production note for our listeners. I wanted to talk about our theme music, our intro and outro music, done by yours truly, TJ. Um, the Could we afford to do a better piece of music?
Yeah, all 3 of us are like pretty decent guitarists. Just saying.
That's true. We definitely could afford to. Will we though?
I mean, definitely not.
I agree
Well,
with
actually,
that.
no. I think I reject the premises. I think the question implies that my theme music is not good.
Well, you know.
Don't start with me, all right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the effort. Anyway, let's get into the review for this episode. Again, if you haven't watched in a while, go back and review it. We're going to kind of hit the main topics. We're going to really explore the moral of it because that's what this podcast is all about. And then we'll talk about some of our favorite jokes and things. And then make sure to stick around for T's hypothetical corner. It's a corner that doesn't really exist. So we are on season 1, episode 8. This one's called Beloved Infidel. We start off in the radio station just like we do every episode. And there is a French lady who has an issue with her monsieur, and they cannot figure out what she's saying when she says monsieur, and so she just gives some general psychiatric advice. Roz has a date and is with a cab driver, and so I think we're getting like she dates some kind of some people that Frasier doesn't approve of, I would say. Niles comes into the radio station, still doesn't remember her, and goes, "What brings you here?" And then Niles tells Frasier that the lecture they were going to was canceled, so they planned dinner instead. And he says, "It sounds like a good night for a couple of guys to go out and get some brewskis." And Niles says, "Yes, but what shall we do?"
Yeah, I got kind of confused by as somebody who's seen the show through. Doesn't Frasier speak French? Why was Monsieur like so confusing to him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was speaking French in the last episode, in fact, with the dinner he made for Catherine. Yeah.
Oh,
Frasier, at least so far, has shown that he speaks he speaks French, just not over the phone.
Yeah.
Lucy Gobble.
La cigar melon. I thought it was pretty funny in this scene too, where they were like, "Oh yeah, I didn't really want to do a whole 2 hour seminar on left brain, right brain synergy," and Niles is like, "I got it down to an hour 45, and I had a really funny joke to say." Like it was Niles's thing.
Yeah, so we kind of set off the episode with that scene. We get to the next one, and Frasier and Niles are sitting at dinner, and they see Martin with a woman, and he had told them he was going out to get beers at his usual haunt, Duke's, and instead he is with a woman at the place they're getting dinner. Niles is worried about his car getting towed, and Frasier tells him not to worry about it. They are hiding behind their menus because they don't want their dad to see them there, and see they think he's on a date, so they don't want to interrupt. And Niles is telling Frasier what's going on. He says he, as in Martin, is holding her hand. He's smiling at her, and she just collapsed into tears, which is one of my favorite jokes. They recognize her as Marion Lawler, who they knew as family friends when they were kids, and they had a falling out after a weekend at their cabin. And so that's kind of where we get in this scene, and then Niles' car gets towed.
I was surprised in this scene. They kind of make a joke about, well, Dad is here. It must not be a very good restaurant. Immediately, I was surprised that they went to a place that had a neon sign outside. That doesn't seem like their vibe.
I agree.
Enjoyed the part where the boys they're spying on their dad, and Niles brings up that she's just burst into tears, and Frasier says something to the effect of, well, that's a Crane first date for you.
Yep. Yeah. The comedic timing and the use of like the menu. So they're hiding behind their menus, and therefore Niles has to narrate what's going on to Frasier, but also narrate it to us as the viewer of the show. Kind of a cool, like, I don't know, call it a literary tool, but like visual tool for the show, you know? I kind of like that.
Yeah, that's something that I thought about in a previous episode. I did like 2 plays when I was in high school, and I never really kind of thought too much about it. But like when you sit around a table,
You
for
did
instance,
2 plays?
everybody's got to be. Yes, I did. They were terrible. Everybody's got to be facing the same way, and it's just not something that you think about, because when you sit around a table regularly, everybody is facing each other, but that's not what happens on the screen. So like when they're in the coffee shop together, they'll have like 3 of them around a table, all on the same kind of half circle, and that jumped out again in this episode too with what you were talking about, Zach. I thought it was pretty cool.
Okay. Well, good to know TJ has done play stuff. That is the what do we decide your job is? The Mr. T effect.
Yeah.
He brings the muscle and the afro and the play experience, the acting experience.
The afro. Have you ever seen Mr. T?
What's that?
You said afro?
Or mohawk. I meant mohawk.
There
yeah.
you go.
You bring the mohawk in the acting experience. That's the Mr. T effect. We get into the next scene, and they kind of use Eddie as a little bit of like a foreshadowing B story in this one. So Eddie's rolling on the couch until Frasier comes in, and then he's like sitting like a good dog. Niles comes in and tells Frasier that he found his journal and has memories from when Martin and their mom were fighting at the time before they went to the lake with the Lawlers. Niles is they make a joke about Niles looking at Nat Geo under his covers, and he goes, "I was looking at the maps," and Frasier goes, "I know, that was what was so disturbing," which is a good one. Niles saw Martin and Miss Lawler in each other's arms. He has a note in his journal about that at that weekend, and then they start presuming that they had an affair together. Niles has photos where a woman has been cut out, and they assume that was Martin with Mrs. Lawler. They say that they're going to call Aunt Vivian, who they refer to as the Mouth, because she holds all the family secrets. Daphne tells them just to ask Martin, and he hears that as he walks in, and so he this claim that he and Mrs. Lawler had an affair when they were younger. He says that's very stupid. And then when they say they're going to call Aunt Vivian, he admits to them that he and Mrs. Lawler did have an affair when they were younger, which kind of takes us as the audience, and I think Frasier and Niles aback to learn that Martin, this guy with all these morals, may have had an affair with somebody.
I really appreciate it. Well, so this scene to me was started out as, Niles sort of reaching for a conspiracy theory. And, Frasier kind of getting to his boiling point, says, what, do you just want me to ask Dad, did you buff one of the neighbors while we were roasting marshmallows?
As kids,
I thought that was a brilliant line. Clearly, they were just about to start like calming down and convincing Niles like, no, it's not a thing. And that's when the dad enters, which was, I think, very well timed. And then Daphne, who thinks they're both crazy, just goes straight and asks him. But it was impressive how the mood changes as soon as Daphne mentions that the boys were going to call Aunt Vivian, because Martin knows Aunt Vivian.
We all have an Aunt Vivian, right?
I know. What'd you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I thought that they played the scene really well. Like the actors did a really great job with it. And listen, I know Daphne's a part of the family, but she's also like Frasier's employee, right? How angry would you be if you were talking about that in front of your employee, and then that person just blurted out to your dad like, "Oh yeah, your sons think you cheated on you." Like, oh my goodness gracious.
I think she has Martin's favor, and I think that's why, like early on, we learned that, and I think that's why, like I'm not uncomfortable by seeing that, because I'm like, she's in her and Martin are friends and they get along, and so that's why I feel like she's just as much part of the family. She can get away with it at least. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It would be weird if that happened. Yeah.
Right.
We get to the next scene, and Niles and Frasier at the coffee shop, and they're talking about how much must have caused their mother a great deal of pain. Frasier even says to Niles, "I can't believe that your dad cheated on my mom." And some random person is listening to this conversation, and Frasier kind of tells him like, "Why don't you pull up a chair?" Just joking, trying to call this guy out for listening. And they kind of hit on the point of the whole episode in this scene where they're talking about, I thought that my father was a man of integrity. I can't believe that he would cheat on my mother.
Probably my favorite joke in the entire episode was the your father cheated on my mother thing. I thought that was really funny. But yeah, I always kind of try to think, like I've said before, I always try to think about how the call relates to the rest of the show. And I don't know that it's the moral. We'll get into that later, but I think a theme of this episode was kind of just jumping to these conclusions. Like in the call, he didn't know what the woman was saying, so he gave her general advice, and there wasn't a lot of clarity. And right now, they still don't have a lot of clarity. They were basing everything off of Niles' 8-year-old journal, and obviously Martin was very upset. So rather than trying to seek clarity, Frasier just kind of gets upset about it, and Niles tries to coach him through that. But when you learn something that is going to break your fundamental understanding of somebody, then it's going to take time to kind of grieve the loss of who you thought they were, maybe. I don't know if that makes any sense.
You stole that from Frasier. That's literally a thing that they do at some point in Frasier. They're like,
Probably
think he says, so you're not missing the person, you're missing the thought of what you would have had or something like that. You literally stole that from TJ. All of TJ's ethics come from the show Frasier.
Yeah, 100%. When he's on the radio, he's not a bad guy, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, so I thought in this scene it was really interesting how they called out their two coping strategies. You've got Niles, who's going to his healing with humor support group, and he still needs to go pick up his oversized shoes, he says, and with a completely straight face. And then you've got Frasier, who's just kind of down in the dumps and trying to like really wrestle through this. But Niles like jumps into a support group. I think these are two really common strategies that people take, right? Like, those who are seeking the community, and then those who are kind of like, no, I can do this myself. Which boat do you guys fall into?
Question,
I'm
and that's
very
a
much
good read on
myself.
Niles. I hadn't really considered it.
Yeah, definitely. I think to answer your question, I'm very much a myself person. Like I don't want anybody if I'm grieving or something, I just want to be left alone for like a couple days or, a couple hours until I can get over it and then I'll go talk to people. But probably not healthy, I don't know. But also, I think the grieving with humor support group, I think I fall into that category as well.
I I don't think I ever get. I think humor is just a general part of my life. I don't know that I use it as a coping strategy. Um, but I will say, yeah, I tend to retreat and want to work through things myself. And I think, personally, I've gotten to a point where I can do that in a way that ends up being healthy. Like I don't ruminate as much as I used to. I don't let things evolve. Like when I'm by myself, things are settling. A lot of times, when folks want to talk to me about it, that's when it feels like, if I get it out now, I'm going to say something I don't want to say, and then it's going to escalate, and I don't want that to happen. I'd rather just deal with it first and then talk about it later. So, um, I don't know. Like Zach said, I don't know that that's always like the best strategy in the world, especially when you have to consider the fact that other people might feel badly about it by not being able to resolve it openly. Um, but yeah, I that is what's more comfortable for me. But oftentimes, what's comfortable is not the best answer. So maybe I don't know, man.
Well, and we kind of get into Martin's like talking about his grieving as well. You get to the next scene where Marion Lawler comes to the house looking for Martin. She wanted to apologize for leaving their dinner so early the other night, and Frasier is abrasive because he believes that they cheated, and he says, "I know what happened," and she says, "Oh, but me and your father forgave your mother and my husband." And Frasier realizes that it wasn't Martin and Marion Lawler that cheated; it was in fact Frasier's mom and Marion Lawler's husband that cheated on Martin and Marion Lawler. And so that's kind of where we get to the whole, it wasn't Martin that did it, although he took the heat for it because he didn't want Frasier to think any differently of her mother. It turns out they were meeting because her husband had just died and both of their spouses had died, and so that was kind of the climax of that episode.
There was a small bit of acting. I'm sure the scene went on a little longer and maybe they cut it or something, but it only lasted like a half a second. Something that I thought Kelsey Grammer did a great job is when he closes the door on Mrs. Lawler, he turns around and starts crying for a moment. And just thinking about what he must have been feeling at the time, grieving his own mom, understanding how much his dad loved his mom to take the bullet for her in that moment, thinking about like the loss that he must have felt throughout the whole thing. Frasier also having to come to terms with the fact that his mom cheated and not his dad, and he blamed his dad. Like there was so many emotions that were going on in that moment, and if you rewatch the episode, just for a brief second, he closes the door and leans against it and starts crying, and I like that hit me. I got to be honest.
I think part of it that I didn't know too is Kelsey Grammer's uh, some of that acting may have come from his personal life, and I don't want to bring in his personal life to the show, but I found out he had a very tragic younger personal life, and so maybe that was part of it, part of why his acting as far as family and things was really so good. Again, I don't want to make that a topic on the show, but yeah, his way of playing that character of somebody who's having family issues and figuring that out, he did such a good job of it. And so then we get to kind of one of the later scenes in the episode where Daphne and Martin are doing PT in the apartment, and Frasier comes in and asks to talk to Martin and says that he knows the truth, that Martin wasn't the one that cheated, it was his mother was the one that cheated. And they sit down and are talking, and Martin says, "Don't hate your mother for this. I wasn't the best person back then, and she had every right to do what she did. And I was just trying to protect her." And then Frasier goes, "I still think you should have told me." And Martin goes, "When your son Frederick grows up, will you tell him that Lilith cheated?" So we also find out that Frasier had a similar incident. His now ex-wife cheated on him, and they both, Martin and Frasier, were both able to bond over this experience. And the fact that they wouldn't tell their son because they wanted to protect their son and their son's view of their mother. And then at the end, they say, I think we finally found something we have in common, which unfortunately was the cheating. They both got cheated on.
Right. Yeah, that was a great scene. Two things that really, kind of jumped out to me. Number one, the whole thing about Lilith cheating on Frasier was a whole plot line that happened in Cheers. So you actually got to see him go through that as well if you watched that first show. But the second thing, speaking of, oh yeah, it was, the guy was weird. It was pretty funny. The second thing that was really funny was, we're talking about other shows and spinoffs. I was really thinking about when Martin said, "Would you tell Frederick?" I was like, that would be a really great plot line for this new show as we walk into the second season. For them to go through this again, but from the perspective of Frasier, who's been through it on the other side.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if they will bring that up. That's a good point. Yeah. I'm excited to see that, and not to get off topic, but I'm excited to see kind of how season 2 of the new one turns out because, and everybody, they got a spinoff and everything. From my standpoint, I was like, it's not as good as the first, but they're probably still trying to figure things out. But anyway, yeah, hopefully maybe they'll bring something like that up. They certainly have plenty of like story depth from the old shows to have a lot of topics to talk about on the new ones. So yeah, excited to see what they do this week with all that. How are we feeling about the moral? Everybody kind of agree with, selflessness from Martin was kind of the moral of the whole thing, not, protecting somebody. And when somebody cheated on him, he forgave them and all of that. Martin just having a high level of integrity.
Yeah, I think this one was about forgiveness. I think Martin had to learn a long time ago to forgive. I think the woman whose husband cheated had to learn to forgive, and they had each other to go through that with, which was good. Frasier and Niles also have to learn how to forgive. Like Taylor said, they're going through that coping stage now. But I think at the end of the day, what Frasier is going to come to realize, and it was probably easier when considering his mom compared to his father, is that beyond anything else, he loves her, and she made a mistake, and he has to forgive her because it's more important, to keep that love in the perspective than it is to judge them for mistakes they've made or what they've done.
Yeah, I thought it was too, like you said it, and I thought it was interesting. They called her cheating a mistake. I've always thought cheating as a choice more than a mistake, right? But they did say Martin was kind of not a great person back then and all of that. And so anyway, just something that caught my ear.
Really liked the emotional peak of the episode where Frasier sits down with his dad and they're just two guys talking about these terrible experiences that they now have in common. I wonder how how an actor gets into that headspace to have that deep connection, but also it was really, I think, a peak in the show as well of now Martin and Frasier have something brand new in common that they share. Is it great? No, and they even make a joke about it in the show. Like, I wish it was something else. But now, where we started in episode 1 with Frasier and Martin, we're now at a completely different, brand new, maybe healthier point for the two characters going forward, which I thought was really cool. That, in our last episode, we talked about ethics and of Frasier and Niles, and now we're kind of talking about the ethics of Martin and how the boys really looked up to him as being this great character or man of great character, and by the end of the episode, he stands as that man of great character, and now Frasier and him are having this in common. I thought it was really cool, and I kind of see that the ethics kind of being a 2-story arc here, but That was kind of my take.
Something from behind the scenes that I ripped straight from IMDb, but I thought it was interesting. This episode is the first to really showcase the logistics of studio sets used throughout the series. If the KACL set and Frasier's apartment were both used, and the Cafe Nervosa scenes were only shot in the little back corner by the bookshelves, it generally means that another large set was taking up too much room in the studio for that particular shoot. In this case, it was Anya's restaurant that made it really difficult for them, so that's why it was only that little back corner of Cafe Nervosa.
No, I did enjoy Frasier's order of a fuzzy navel blended frothy when they were at Anya's restaurant, and he was making fun of Niles's order, and then he orders a fuzzy navel blended frothy. I just thought was extra fun.
Yeah, I don't know why the word frothy is like moist. Like, I don't care about moist, but frothy just sounds gross. Hypothetical corner. You spot your dad out on a date in public. Do you interrupt? Taylor, your first go.
Personally, I'm going to take the Niles and Frasier approach and hide behind my menu. If not, leave. Too awkward.
Walking up to dad on his date. I'm spanking him on the butt, kissing him on the cheek. You know what I mean? I'm doing everything I can just to make him feel super weird about it. I haven't watched the show before. I think that there's a couple certain episodes that I remember that really stand out. Martin's my favorite character. Not the funniest. Sometimes he's hilarious, but a good Martin episode. This one's a 10 for me. This is one of my, top handful for sure.
That in mind, I'm going with an 8.
Do this one ASMR style. Hey baby, I hear the blues are calling. Toast salads and scrambled eggs. Seattle.